Welcome to Acquisitions Part 2. I thought it might be a good idea to show you the library guide since I mentioned it in Part 1. Just show you where some of the resources that I'm talking about can be found. So this is the library guide under Find Acquisitions Reading tab. And you can see under Acquisitions Readings, the top 4 resources are the ones that I mentioned that I got some of those statistics for costs of resources versus library budgets. Let me put my glasses on. So the SLJ's 2014 spending survey has done a survey of library media specialists to see what their budgets are. And that's an interesting resource, obviously up to date since it's 2014. SLJ's average book prices for 2014 is where I found another one of those graphics. So these top 4 resources are very interesting resources to become familiar with so that you can advocate for your library and your budget. If I scroll down over here under the box that has my picture in it is resources for grants, and these links go out to both like the AASL awards and grants. That's a compilation of grants. The Institution of Museum and Library Services is a federally funded institution that provides grants. So good places to go to find alternative funding. So I just wanted to show you that so you would know where to find it. All right, let's get back to the lecture. So once you have determined how the budget for new materials will be structured and set up the ledger, the process of selecting resources can begin. And since we covered this in depth last week, I'm not going to go over it again, except to say that an important part of the selection process is to determine the cost of the resource. Obviously, a resource that's too expensive, no matter how useful or desirable, cannot be justified expense because it requires too large a portion of the collection development budget. So you have to weigh the value of a resource to your collection in terms of the holistic view of the budget and the collection. Some vendors have acquisition modules that provide reviews and recommended titles lists to support your collection development efforts. Additionally, you are often able to purchase or download free MARC records for cataloging resources that you just ordered. Follett's product is called Tidal Wave, and YBP or Baker & Taylor's product is called Gobi. After selecting which resources you would like to purchase, the process of acquiring those resources begins, and now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Speaking of that, the Arizona State Library's Archives and Records Collection Development Training website includes a page on acquisitions that's a lovely summary of the processes that take place in the acquisitions budget. It is one of your assigned readings, and I think you will find it to be very informative, especially if you have never been exposed to the processes of acquiring materials. And they have a section called Nitty Gritty that's going to be covering some of the stuff I'm covering in this part 2. This section of the acquisitions lecture briefly covers the processes of ordering, receiving, and invoicing. First of all, it is important that you are aware of the correct process for placing orders. The school district may have approved vendors or have contracts or agreements that you need to be aware of and processes that need to be followed. Additionally, some states require that purchases be tax-free, so vendors need to be notified of that requirement. They can accommodate that, they just need to know about it. Purchasing library resources is a little bit different than purchasing office supplies, and bookkeepers often don't understand that difference. And so, for instance, bookkeepers are used to placing an order, receiving the requested items, and invoicing to pay the bill, and the process is complete, and then they close their purchase order. With libraries, not every item requested on a given purchase order comes in at the same time, if ever. So often monies continue to be encumbered until the bookkeeper is notified that the purchase order is closed. Subscriptions and standing orders are a particularly difficult method of purchase for bookkeepers, not for us, but for bookkeepers, as they require open orders, so orders that never get closed. Open orders are problematic for bookkeepers because they want to complete the process and close the purchase order, and open orders don't allow for that. So you want to make sure you have a good working relationship with the bookkeeper or the person who's going to process the invoices and cut the checks, so that they understand what you're doing and it makes sense for what they need to do. Excuse me. So, as I've said before, it's a good idea to have a purchasing plan for the year. Prioritize selections according to a tiered system. If materials in the highest tier are unavailable or more funds become available, materials in the second tier can then be purchased. If a collection development plan, if you're using a collection development plan, the library media specialist will know which materials will be purchased in the following year, and if there are funds remaining at the end of the year, and can move forward on purchasing materials for areas that are on the next year's collection development plan. So that's another good reason to have that plan in place. Start placing orders as soon as possible in the school year so that materials can be purchased in a systematic way and not left until the end of the year when monies need to be spent or they will be lost. A process should be in place to ensure that duplicate materials are not purchased. This can be done by checking the ILS or an on-order file before placing an order. If you're using your ILS's acquisitions module, just one search should locate both resources already available as well as those that are on order. And you often need to do that search to set up a PO in an ILS system anyway, so it's a really great way to kill several birds with one stone. Sorry for that gruesome analogy, but that's what came to mind. By using a vendor's acquisitions module, you can track purchases made through them, and it will notify you if a duplicate order is in place. But this only covers resources ordered from that vendor, so is only somewhat helpful if you're using more than one vendor. Now, don't forget the value of negotiation. Often the cost for big packages or expensive databases can be negotiated, and actually vendors expect that things will be negotiated. You can also work out an agreement to spend a certain amount of money each year through a vendor. As part of that agreement, you can negotiate to not paying shipping and handling charges or getting a higher discount rate. Licensing details can also be negotiated. The number of concurrent users of a database or what titles come in a package can all be negotiated, just depending on the vendor and the package. A very important part of the acquisition process is selecting the vendor through whom you will purchase the resources. Sometimes that work is already done, as I've mentioned before, as a school district has made an agreement with the vendor in which they offer a discount in order for them to be the primary vendor for resources. However, no one vendor can supply all of the resources that a library provides access to, and sometimes the type of resource as well as the urgency of the need will require choosing a different vendor for the purchase. Additionally, there are various types of vendors. A vendor can be a jobber, a store, or a publisher. Each has their own advantages and disadvantages when ordering from them. Stores are a type of vendor. Stores can be either brick and mortar or online, such as Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The advantages to purchasing from a store is that there is usually quick, or for brick and mortar, immediate turnaround. If the need for a given resource is urgent and the store has the item in stock, you can have it in the students' or teachers' hands in a matter of days, if not hours. Walk into the store, pick up the book, pay for it, and walk out. Another advantage is that the resource can be thumbed through, allowing a visual inspection of the quality of the resource. Additionally, stores can often accommodate your request for materials that they do not have in stock. Depending on the store, some of the disadvantages to purchasing from stores, such as cost or lack of processing and MARC records, can be mitigated. Local independent stores are working hard to get your business and can be willing to cut you a deal if you commit to purchasing a certain amount from them every year. They are also starting to contract out for shelf-ready processing, library binding, and MARC record delivery. A different option for purchasing resources is to go directly to the publisher. Sometimes, depending on the format of the resource, you really have no option but to purchase directly from the publisher. One of these, for instance, is PBS DVDs. You can't purchase PBS DVDs through a vendor. You have to go directly to them and purchase from them. The disadvantage of purchasing directly from a publisher is that there is little ability to negotiate on price or shipping and handling costs because the volume just doesn't warrant it for the publisher. Some publishers may have MARC records available for their resources. However, the quality of these records can be quite poor and not worth your effort to download them into your system. Sometimes they charge for those MARC records, and then you're paying for something that's not of very good quality. This slide includes a list of some types of publishers that might be used by school districts. The vendor used by most libraries to purchase most of their resources are called jobbers. Jobbers are middlemen who are contracted to monitor purchases through multiple publishers, ensuring that the resource is received by the library. They purchase resources in bulk, so can offer you, and by doing that from the publisher, they get a discount, and then they can turn around and offer you a discount. Jobbers will be able to claim missing issues and request refunds if subscriptions are canceled. Items not yet printed or out of print will be monitored for a set period of time and shipped when available, or told that the order is canceled if it's been canceled by the publisher. They will also be able to set up standing orders and approval plans. Additionally, the library pays the jobber directly instead of having to make multiple payments to all of the different publishers. And all of this saves the time of the library media specialist. Jobbers are able to purchase in bulk or offer multiple subscriptions in a package, so a library often gets a reduction off the list price of the resource. You can negotiate with the jobber to not charge shipping or handling, or get a larger discount if you commit to spending a certain dollar amount every year. Additionally, jobbers can provide shelf-ready services as well as MARC records. Shelf-ready means that the physical resources come to the library processed and cataloged according to specifications that you've worked out with the vendor, and they're ready to go out on the shelf when you take them out of the box. MARC records, which is our cataloging record, our format for cataloging records, can be included and will need to be loaded into the ILS when received. So while you would get the books in physical form, the records would be sent electronically, or you would need to go to the publisher or a vendor's website to get those records and download them. It's a good idea to compare the physical item to the record to make sure that they are a good match, as quality of cataloging differs from vendor to vendor. Some are good, some are not so good. Shelf-ready processing costs can be minimal. It just depends on what you have the vendor do to the resource. So at Murray State, we have resources that we get in shelf ready. We have them stamped on the title page and on the top of the book. They apply a barcode, they apply a security strip, and they apply a spine label. And those costs right now are a little over $2 a book. And that includes the things that I just mentioned. Cataloging costs are additional to that. Shelf-ready processing frees up the time of the library media specialist to work on other tasks. So while it does cost a little bit more, depending on how full your plate is, it may be worth the cost to have all of that stuff done elsewhere to free you up for other things. Resources get out to the shelves much quicker than if they waited to be cataloged and processed in-house. I actually did a study from the point of order to the point of when materials that came through Shelf Ready were able to be put out on the shelf versus when they came not Shelf Ready and we had to do the cataloging and processing. And we actually saved quite a bit of time in getting those resources out on the shelf. You'll want to investigate several jobbers before signing a contract with one to make sure that you're getting the most from your jobber. Ask what publishers they work with, what services they provide, what discounts they can provide, which services incur fees and which services are free. Turnaround time from order to receipt should be about 3 to 4 weeks for 80% of your order. You'll want to do business with a company that has a service rep that you can get a hold of and who is respectful of your time and funding level. You don't want a service rep who's going to call you asking if you want to order and not respect the fact that you have very limited funds and you've spent your allotted amount and having nothing more to spend. You'll also want to work with a sales rep who is responsive to you and the needs of your library. Contracts with jobbers should be updated every several years. This is the time to renegotiate discounts and fees, as well as how much you'll commit to spend with them. It's good to investigate other jobbers at this time, as their policies, services, and fees may have changed since you last considered them. Now, you don't have to have a contract with a vendor to use them, but often the contract is what helps negotiate for those discounts. I've included a list of jobbers at the bottom of the Find Acquisitions Reading page in the library guide. So under that long list of readings, you'll find the list of those jobbers. It's almost like Christmas when the boxes full of resources start coming in. It's fun to open the boxes and see what new titles have arrived. Receiving and invoicing requires careful attention to make sure your ledger reflects an accurate amount of funds that are available, how much has been spent, and what has been purchased. The boxes should be unpacked as soon as possible so that if anything needs to be sent back, it can be done so quickly and a credit applied before the invoice is paid, if possible. Compare the shipping list with the contents in each box. Just want to make sure that you're actually getting what the jobber or the publisher said that they were sending you. Look the resources over to make sure they're in good condition, that they're bound correctly and not upside down, there are no missing or damaged pages, and that the binding is secure. Now, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. You can, but it's very easy to tell rather quickly when you open a book and fan through it, whether it's been bound upside down or if there's a chapter missing. For media, once the package seal is broken, it's often difficult to return. So make sure that you develop a good relationship with your vendor and make sure that they will take back and replace any broken CDs, DVDs, or other media that may have been broken during shipment. So even if the package seal is broken because you've opened it and you find out that it's a DVD that's been broken, I've often been able to just contact the vendor and say, hey, we got this, we received this broken, and they're more than willing to take it back. But they may not, and they have that little warning on the CD or DVD package that says if you open this, it probably won't be able to be returned. So just be aware of that. Once you've determined that you received everything that was shipped and that it's in good condition, receive and invoice each title in your ILS, your bookkeeping software, or spreadsheet. It's unlikely that you will receive everything that was on the purchase order, so be prepared for the order to remain open for a while. Check with your bookkeeper for what the procedure is for paying vendors. You'll probably have to send the invoice to the bookkeeper or accounting office in order for them to cut the check. And you'll want to keep a copy in your records too, so be sure you make a copy of that. Invoicing for serials and electronic resources is a little bit different than for physical items that you receive once. Serials are paid for at the point of order, usually a year at a time. You receive them as they arrive, so as each issue arrives, you will receive and track them so that you're aware of when you miss an issue. Often, you notify the jobber that you missed an issue and another one will be sent. You can't open a box and take out an electronic resource. Part of the receiving process for those types of materials is just getting and downloading the MARC record into the catalog and making sure that all the links work. Those resources you also pay for in advance when access is provided. The subscription or license on these resources will need to be renewed every year or access will be turned off. Set up a reminder system so that you can be proactive about renewing them before users are negatively affected. Managing digital or electronic resources is a complex task, made even more complex by not having a physical item in hand to ensure that you're getting what you paid for. I have assigned a blog post for you to read by Doug Johnson that summarizes the complexities of providing access to electronic resources. An electronic management system is helpful, but it's also very expensive. So more often than not, a library will have to just create a spreadsheet to track all of the parts that need to be taken care of when purchasing access to cataloging and making available digital online resources. And that is the ordering, receiving, and invoicing process, the end of acquisitions part 2.